barreling down and was so excited for him to taste this that, you know, he had never had whipping cream before with sugar in it. And Prabhupada was teaching us how to be very disciplined people, but, you know, I was so excited that I implored him to dip his finger into this bowl of whipping cream, you know, in the, I don't know where, I don't think it was in the bathroom, but it was, you know, it was an appropriate place. It was maybe in the living room, and it hadn't been offered, and so he would, you know, dip his finger in there and go, oh my, and, you know, his eyes would get so big. And, you know, it was just, I so enjoyed just,
About the artichokes. Were you getting some artichokes?
I don't remember the artichokes. Oh yeah, I know, I'm hearing a story about artichokes, I don't know, they'll have to tell me. So, you know, that was the kind of relationship we had, and it was very different than I noted what he had with Yamuna. Yamuna, he was quite a disciplinarian with her, and of course she had such responsibilities. I wasn't like that. I was, you know, when I asked him, do you have any children? I mean, he didn't miss a beat in saying, you are not my child, you are not all my children. And then, you know, the sincerity, it was just, you know, it was enough to just, oh, it was like going home. It really was, to have that kind of response. It was so real, and nobody could ever take that away from him. You know, nobody was going to walk away from that, or nobody could take that away from you. That kind of unconditional love was just extraordinary. And as we all know today, 30 years later, or with the little kids in this room, you know, and they have many years to go, unconditional love is a gift. And it's just so rare. So anyway, I found today that if we were sitting around the room reminiscing about these stories, that I would start something and Malati could finish it for me, and that's the first time in 32 years that I've had somebody to do that with. I mean, Yamuna and I do that, but Yamuna and I are sisters, and so, you know, Yamuna and I have cooking to talk about and that kind of thing. Yep. So Malati says, I am not your sister. So, yeah. Touche. So, anyway, it was a lovely day, and I'm kind of just totally overwhelmed.
I remember one time when Srila Prabhupada was sitting in the airport lounge waiting to go back to New York, and he had his ticket in his hand, and you reached over his shoulder and took his ticket away from him. And you walked off like you weren't going to give it back to him, and Prabhupada got really alarmed. For sure, because you were such a naughty girl all the time with him, that you were stealing his ticket. He was very seriously concerned you weren't going to give it back to him.
Now you can't go, Swamiji.
Now you can't go, Swamiji.
Listen, I want to say something about my sister and I. We Jamuna. I left Krishna consciousness because I was disillusioned with. Believe me, it was not Prabhupada. I was disillusioned with some other issues, and so I left Krishna consciousness. And it was my sister Andina who brought me home again. And through consistently just being kind and loving and humorous, and sending me, you know, books to read, and just sending me invitations to come up and play with them and be in their association. Yamuna and I have a much deeper relationship than cooking, so I don't ever want to diminish that or undermine that. And Dina is absolutely my sister as well. And has brought Berber and I both well into the arms of Krishna consciousness again. So I just wanted to say that.
You have a story about the early days? I think what's been being brought out here also is that we have to remember from those days how lenient Srila Prabhupada was with us. how he slowly brought us into Krishna consciousness by just through his love and his beauty and his charm. Maybe you can remember some story.
So I'll go back to New York. This is day 2. It's 9 o'clock in the morning, and I walk into Srila Prabhupada's apartment. I still have on the mini skirt and the tank top, and it's really hot. So I've never liked heat, no matter what. Anyway, he overlooks the dress, and he said, "Please come into my office." So there's 2 rooms, a bathroom, and a galley kitchen. And we go into this other room. There's a little grass mat on the floor, and in front of it is a metal trunk. And that's Srila Prabhupada's office. And on top of his metal trunk are a few pieces of his personal possessions, and they're all very impeccably placed. I remember looking very neat, but very Spartan, very much like one would think a sage, not very many possessions. But in the corner, it was the right-hand corner end of his trunk, was a stack of cards. These days, the hippies didn't really think of using business cards. Wasn't even on the menu. So Srila Prabhupada had picked up a card and he handed it to me with great pride and said, "The International Society for Krishna Consciousness." And he said, "I'd like to give you one of my cards." And I said, "Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate it." He said, "Would you like some more?" And I said, "Okay." He said, "Do you have some friends you can give them to?" I said, "Well, yes, I could do that when I return to Oregon." And I'm thinking, who in Oregon is going to use this business card for the International Society for Krishna Consciousness? But I graciously take the cards. So then he said, "So we need a few ingredients before we do the cooking. Can you do the shopping?" So I've never been to New York in my life. And I said, "Yes, I can do the shopping." So he said, "Yes, just on the corner there's a grocery store and you can pick up a few items there." So he had maybe 4 or 5 items, and I don't even look what's on. But I go down to the grocery store, and when I look at the list, I see one says HULD, H-U-L-D. So I look to the little Korean man, and I said, "Do you have some HULD?" No, HULD. I think you do, because my Swamiji said that you have HULD. I said, no, HULD. So I think, okay, he doesn't have any HULD. So I go back up, and the first thing that Swamiji says to me is, "Did you get everything on the list?" And I lie. The first day, and I look and say, "Yes." So he opens the bag, and there's 4 items instead of 5. And he said, "Where's the HULD?" And I said, "The man doesn't know what HULD is." He said, I am sending my man there. He is buying all the time." I said, "Is there another name for HULD?" He said, "Turmeric." So, oh, okay. "Do you want me to go back?" "No." So the first wedding feast in ISKCON was cooked without any haldi or turmeric because I couldn't do it. So Srila Prabhupada, there's this little galley kitchen. Galley kitchen means there's one side is sink and little counter on both sides, little refrigerator. Other side there's little counter. So I'm sitting in the front room, and Srila Prabhupada said, "So today you will make one dish." "Okay, Swamiji." "That is called aloo kachori." "Okay, Swamiji." So he puts down in front of me a pitcher of water, a bag of flour, and a couple pounds of butter, and says, "Please make a medium hard dough. So I said, would you like a pâté brisé or a chou en flou? And Prabhupada said, how old are you? And I said, I'm 25, Swamiji. He said, you're 25 and you can't make a medium hard dough? So immediately I'm feeling a little bad because the first thing that he asks me to do, we're having a cross we're not understanding. I'm not understanding what a medium hard dough is, and he isn't understanding what pâté brisé is. So here's the story of how we're learning from each other. So he said, in India, any girl 7 years old, she can make a medium hard dough. So now I'm feeling insulted. My false ego is just rising to the surface like cream on cold milk. So he said, I will show you. And that's the first time that I watched Srila Prabhupada's hands touch ingredients cooking for Krishna. And he made a dough like something I'd never seen before, because we know that pâté brisé, we handle very little. It's a pie crust dough, so you don't knead it, you barely put it together. But Srila Prabhupada made a dough where he kneaded it vigorously, as you know, for kachoris or samosas. So then he said, there, and I said, well, thank you very much. So then he brought in some mashed potatoes, and he took some spices and he put them in. And he showed me how to make a kachori. Now, in pastries, kachori is the most difficult pastry surely there is in our Indian tradition, because it's fried very slowly for a long time. And if the dough isn't right, if the temperatures aren't regulated very well, if the pan is too crowded, if the pastries are not sealed properly, the dish is a disaster. There's really only one way to make kachoris, and that's to make them expertly. And I had no idea what I was doing. And so from 9:30 or 10 o'clock a.m. until 4 o'clock, I made kachoris in front of Srila Prabhupada. And I watched him in the kitchen, and I remember seeing him, how very expert he was in the kitchen. He was silent. He was chanting Hare Krishna quietly. His hands were so dynamic. He whipped with his hands. He brayed with his hands. He tossed with his hands. He mixed with his hands. He chopped by hand. And in the course of me doing kachoris for 6 hours, Srila Prabhupada brought out 14 dishes for 100 people. At least 100 people, although there was maybe only 40 at the wedding. He cooked that much for Shara. And just briefly, it's interesting when we say that Prabhupada was very lenient with us. He was surely very lenient, but that very first day in the kitchen, he began instructing me. When about 12 o'clock in the day, I looked at Srila Prabhupada and I said, Swamiji, may I have a glass of water? And he said, go wash your hands. So I thought, that's odd. And I got up and washed my hands, and then he said, so this is a different kind of cooking than any other cooking you have ever done before. This is cooking for Krishna. So when we're cooking for Krishna, we don't eat or drink in the kitchen. I said, okay. So then maybe an hour later, I said, Swamiji, could I have a cigarette break? And he said, go wash your hands. So I went in and washed my hands, and he said, no, you're cooking for Krishna. He said, there's 4 little things that you won't do anymore. What is that, Swamiji? He said, you won't smoke any more cigarettes. No more cigarettes and no more intoxicants. Okay. And no illicit sex life. For cooking, Swamiji? Not for cooking for Krishna. No gambling? Oh, okay, I don't gamble. And no meat eating. Okay, thank you very much, Swamiji. So, my very first day cooking for Srila Prabhupada, he encourages me that I'm supposed to do these 4 things, and that I'm supposed to think of Krishna and not drink any water or taste anything that I'm cooking. So I'm thinking this is most unusual, but this is what I'm doing. So the first batch of kachoris that I sent in to Srila Prabhupada, he comes back and says they're all falling apart because you're not sealing them properly. So he shows me how to do it again. And I think for my whole life, I'll always judge that kachoris are my Waterloo in the kitchen, because I know what perfection is from the very, very first day of watching Srila Prabhupada's hands making kachoris and shaping them. And a kachori is so amazing because although it's fried for a long time over the fire, when it's cooked properly, it becomes very flaky and it is not the slightest bit greasy. And there's a beautiful contrast between the layers that are caused by the oil being just the right temperature and the dough being just the right consistency of flakiness, like you might think of a puff pastry, a fried puff pastry, only a little more dense. So that's the first thing that Srila Prabhupada taught me, and I'm so indebted for that first day of introduction into assisting to cook for Janki's wedding on the auspicious day of the first day in the kitchen with Prabhupada. Thank you.
On that subject, Malati, I remember a story you told in Pune last winter about how Prabhupada spotted you from his window across the street in the truck, the dairy truck. Can you tell that story?
Well, indirectly, it's a cooking story. I have to tell that one. In cooking for Krishna, we had to become accustomed to using finer ingredients than we normally used, such as we stopped using gross cooking oil and we started using butter, or we turned it into ghee. But being hippies and being poor and not having a lot of money, butter was a little costly. I think it still is probably costly. And still we had to use butter. So across the street from the 518 Frederick Street Temple was a little corner store. And every day there would be a dairy truck that would pull up and the driver would go and make his delivery. But he'd park in front of the temple because there was no parking in front of that store. So when he would make his delivery, I'd go to his truck and take 2 pounds of butter. And one day Prabhupada asked me, he said, because he could look out, his room was overlooking the street. And I was in his room, he said, every day I see you going to a truck, what are you doing? So I was kind of thinking, he must know what I'm doing, so I was trying to think of how to say the truth to him, so I said, well, Swamiji, I'm getting butter. And he very casually said, yes, Krishna was also a butter thief. So when he said that, I kind of was taken back because although he didn't say it, I understood that Krishna could steal butter, but I probably shouldn't steal butter. So then I had to resort to some other means. That's when the bottle collecting days started. He said, you know, there were so many hippies just crawling all over the place in those days, and now we have bottled water, but in those days everyone was drinking soda. It came in a bottle, and you had to pay a deposit. So they would just discard the bottles, and I'd send squads of people out with bags to collect the bottles, because you could turn them in, and you get the 2 cents or 3 cents back from the bottle. And so using the money from all these bottles, that's how I had to start buying the butter. But referring back to Srila Prabhupada's tolerance, on our initiation, which was the third initiation in ISKCON, Janaki's was the first initiation actually, and then there was one other initiation before they came to San Francisco. And a few of the New York devotees came. So these devotees that came out to San Francisco, they were the senior devotees of the movement, which means they were 2 or 3 months older than we were in spiritual life. And they knew everything, and they liked to let us know it also. So we were initiated within a very fast time after Prabhupada's arrival. He arrived on the 16th or 17th of January, and we were initiated, I thought it was about a week later, but a week to 10 days later. It was quite quick. And I remember being handed a list, and the list was the ingredients that was needed for this initiation. So there was bananas, I can understand that, some sand, some bricks, some wood, and 5 pounds of butter. So I asked him, what are we going to do with this butter? And this person told me we were going to put it on the fire. And I just looked at him, what a waste. Because we didn't really have any concept of sacrifice, what was meaning of sacrifice or oblations. And 5 pounds of butter was really too expensive, so Shyamasundarmalati was very creative and innovative. And he went to this dairy, like a big dairy, commercial dairy place, processing plant. And he managed to get the butter donated because it was butter that had touched some equipment, and therefore they couldn't sell it. And he had to sign a release that we weren't going to consume it, because we weren't going to eat it, we were going to put it in the fire. So in this way we were, do you remember that? So this way we were able to get our 5 pounds of butter. And so on this first initiation, there was just a very few people that had any idea what was really going to go on. We knew there was going to be a fire in the room, and that our names and our lives are going to change forever. And we spent the preceding day making your beads, and I was at Yamuna's, and probably if any of you have been there, you have seen that she still has her original set of japa beads, because we all had to string our beads in those days. Nobody had been to India, and there wasn't any stores available to buy ready-made beads. So we had these big, huge wooden red beads that we purchased at a craft shop. I think it was Tandy Leather Company, actually. And even our neck beads, they became Tulsi by Prabhupada's desire, but they were just wooden beads, ordinary wooden beads that we strung. And we would bring these beads, he would chant on them. And he was on one side of the fire, his back against the wall, and there was 5 of us sitting on the other side, and all of the interested hippies and the senior devotees were there. And it's a very, now you know what's going to happen beforehand, but we just didn't know what was going to happen. And so what did happen was that the room just, was very aromatic, firstly with all the hippies, because the hippies didn't always take a lot of baths, but they would use a lot of patchouli oil in particular, and so the room could be quite fragrant. And then, we got these new names that we couldn't understand, that we couldn't pronounce. These beads came around our neck, which was, for life. And then the fire started, and the room quickly filled up with smoke. And all the time, Swamiji was chanting some mantras, and we were expected to repeat them. And then they handed us each a banana, and that seemed like a familiar object. So we started to peel it. And we were, no, you have to put the banana on the fire, so we put the banana on the fire. And you know, you feel kind of bewildered because the room was just filled with smoke and incense, and the chanting was kind of haphazard, and you really couldn't understand what was being said that easily. Prabhupada's English was quite heavily accented. So after giving us the banana, he said, it sounded like bodong, bodong. We couldn't really understand what he was telling us. And one of the initiates, his name was Harvey Cohen, and he became Haridas. He was a little older than the rest of us, and he became our first temple president in San Francisco. So we kind of looked to him. He was a little older. He should know a little more than we should know. So his take on it was this. He leaned forward, so we all leaned forward, and then he just started blowing on the fire. So we blew on the fire. And, you know, in the hippie lingo, there was a saying, you know, oh, that blew my mind. Well, there wasn't a whole lot that you could do that would blow Prabhupada's mind, because after all, he was constantly associating with Krishna. So, I mean, who could do anything more than Krishna could do? So, at the same time, there were often small things that would happen that Prabhupada would actually express some degree of surprise. And the way you could notice it was his eyes would become very enlarged. So I remember looking through this fire that was going in his face. And for the first time I saw these saucer eyes, these big eyes. So we could understand maybe this wasn't what he wanted us to do after all. And in the meantime, he just picked up his kartals and he started a kirtan. What he was trying to do, of course, was to tell us to bow down, which, you know, the very fact that he would need to tell us, his newly initiated disciples, to bow down indicates the degree of our advancement was very minimal, and the degree of his tolerance was very extreme. So he did one thing that he knew would save the situation, and he began a kirtan.
Let's see, I guess I'll talk about the day that the drum arrived. So, it's just kind of a quick story, but it was so exciting. He had ordered the Murindanga, and the day it arrived, we got word that it was being delivered downstairs, and Prabhupada was so excited that we had an elevator up to the 3rd floor, but he literally flew down 3 flights of stairs, followed by Mukunda and myself, and ripped open the